Yeah, tomorrow, thank you for generous words. Tomorrow I will present at a conference on academic paper on the context and why things are happening exactly in Japan. Maria, we have decided not to take pictures. And but today, I believe that some in this room, before an explanation of what's happening in Japan, need a description of what's happening in Japan, because we may not know. So what is happening in Japan is very strange, because Japan, we consider a democratic country, protesting when religious freedom is violated in China and in other parts of the world. And it has also resisted the previous attempts to promote anti-cult legislation, even when Japan was hit by the terrorist attack of a Buddhist new religious movement, Aum Shinrikyo. It resisted proposal to pass anti-cult laws and even did not dissolve Aum Shinrikyo. Aum Shinrikyo was simply restructured, given a new name, new leader. So Japan, even after the terrible attack in the subway of Tokyo by a religious movement, was still very protective of religious liberty. But when everything changed in 2022. In 2022, the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated in Nara. And after a few days, it came out that assassin, one Tetsuya Yamagami, wanted to kill Abe because Abe was in some way a friend of the Unification Church. It had appeared at events of the Universal Peace Federation, which is not the same thing as Unification Church, but at the same founders and leaders, and has been supported by volunteers of the International Federation for Victory Over Communism, also founded by Reverend Moon in his electoral campaign. So Yamagami told the police, I wanted to punish the Unification Church because I have problems with my mother. My mother is a member of Unification Church, and in 2002 she went bankrupt, according to the Son, because of her excessive donations to the Unification Church. Mind the day, 2002, and they killed Abe in 2022. So Yamagami told to the police, I wanted to kill Mrs. Moon, but when technically killing Mrs. Moon, I realized was more difficult than killing Shinzo Abe, which is not a compliment to the Japanese Secret Service protecting politicians. And so I decided to killing Shinzo Abe instead. But I did try my gun, and that was true, they found the bullets, by firing at a church of the Unification Church before. So, and then he killed Shinzo Abe. And some parts of the story didn't really make the media. Number one, we still hear, even by scholars, even this morning in Vienna, that Yamagami was a member of the Unification Church. He was not, because he was not even raised in the Unification Church. When his mother joined, he was already grown up, so he had nothing to do personally, except that his mother was a member. Another detail was never very much discussed in the media is the mother never complained about the donation, but when some relatives started complaining, wealthy members of Unification Church volunteered to give 50% of the donations back to her as a gift. And the third point, which was easy to spot, but nobody discussed it, nobody asked one very simple question. Mrs. Yamagami, the mother, went bankrupt in 2002. Yamagami Tetsuya, the son, kills Abe in 2022. What happened in the meantime? Because one can understand my mother went bankrupt, I'm very upset, I take a gun and kill somebody connected with the church. Okay, in 2002, but why he waited 20 years? And so what was discovered was that only in the last few years he started attending anti-cult activities. And I'm not saying that the anti-cultists told him to kill Abe. That would be a stupid theory. In fact, he wrote to a prominent anti-cultist a letter saying he was going to kill Abe. And the anti-cultist was a good citizen because he ran immediately to the police, but he received the letter after Abe had already been assassinated. So I'm not saying that the anti-cultist told him to kill Abe, but I'm saying that, of course, the guy had some mental problems, otherwise you don't go around. And for a person with mental problems to be continuously excited by anti-cult forums on the internet or bad are the cults, of course, that is something which can have influenced him. Anyway, the question why he killed 20 years after the bankruptcy of the mother was never asked. What happened in a few days, not few weeks, a few days, is that the Japanese anti-cultists immediately called the press conferences. Even they were honored guests at the prestigious Foreign Media Club in Tokyo, and inundated the Japanese media propaganda against the Unification Church and the cults in general. So the Unification Church was clearly a victim. The assassin wanted to destroy the Unification Church by killing significant people connected directly, indirectly with the church. But the Unification Church was presented as the perpetrator. In the first press conference, one of the leaders of the anti-cult movement in Japan said Yamagami, the assassin, is 100% the victim. And Abe and the Unification Church are 100% the perpetrator. So that was totally reversed because Abe was killed and the killer killed him. But the killer was the victim. And the argument was very twisted. The argument is if the mother of Yamagami had never became a member of Unification Church, the son would not have hated the Unification Church and would not have killed Abe. But that's reminiscent of the defense in some rape trial. If the girl had not been beautiful, nobody would have raped her. That's not normally regarded as a valid defense. But in this case, all the media, I mean, the Yamagami, there is a lot of sympathy. In Japan, you can buy T-shirt with the image of Yamagami. He's a hero. And the Unification Church was regarded as the responsible for the homicide and the trouble. And then, while they were at it, the anti-cultists started calling other press conferences, say, you know, it's not only the Unification Church which can produce people like Yamagami, it's also the Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses, of course, zero to do with the assassination of Abe, but there is an unwritten rule. When you want to attack religious minorities, attack the Jehovah's Witnesses. That always works. And so the Jehovah's Witnesses also started being attacked daily by the media in Japan. If it were only the media, that would not have been a problem. The problem was that the government got scared by the media and by the opposition. Why? Because the media, particularly the leftist media, Japan has a conservative government headed by the Liberal Democrat Party. So the media started investigating the connection between the Unification Church, which was depicted as the devil, and the Liberal Democrat Party. And it came out, they were very old connection, dated back to Abe's grandfather, not even to Shinzo Abe, who was prime minister, even the grandfather. And the Unification Church always had a friendly relation, but just as the second party in the coalition is a party called Komeito, which was founded by members of Soka Gakkai and has a very good relation, of course, with Soka Gakkai. Some of the parties of the left are chock full of left-wing Catholics, and the Liberal Democrat Party was supported by Unification Church members, particularly during the Cold War, because, as most of you may know, the Unification Church is anti-communist. The Liberal Democrat Party was anti-communist, so they supported the Liberal Democrat Party. So these things came out and scared to death the Liberal Democrat Party, which passed a resolution: if you are a member of Unification Church, you cannot be a member of the Liberal Democrat Party, you cannot even appear at events of the Liberal Democrat Party. And so they were totally scared, and they accepted all the proposals coming from the opposition for anti-cult and anti-Unification Church legislation. So what happened were basically four things. The first thing was investigation into the Unification Church, which led to request by the government to the Tokyo District Court to dissolve the Unification Church as a religious corporation. In Japan, the government doesn't have the power of dissolving a religious organization which has been registered as such. The government should file a lawsuit and the judge will decide. And the first hearing will be in December. And it's a long story because after the first degree there will be an appeal. After the appeal there will be a Supreme Court case. So the government as moving to dissolve the Unification Church, and there are some comments to be made. Number one, you may have read, if you follow this story, oh, that's not a big problem. The Unification Church was only lose the tax exemption if it's no longer recognized as a religion. Totally not true. In Japanese law, if a corporation is dissolved, a liquidator is appointed to take possession of all the real estate, all the money, all the assets, and sells it, and gives the money to the victims or to the government. So it's a death penalty, the liquidation. It's not only that you lose the tax exemption, you are totally destroyed as a religious organization. Number two, the law on the dissolution of religious organization, which was almost never applied. It was applied in 2-3 cases. And in the case of Aum Shinrikyo, it was managed to allow them to reconstruct under another name, even if they had terrorists, basically, killed a lot of people. But they still exist with another name. They're called Aleph, and they saved most of their assets. So the law said that a religious organization can be dissolved if it has perpetrated illegal acts. And the unanimous interpretation of courts of law in Japan has been illegal acts means that there should be court decisions in Japan that significant number, that members or leaders or the organization in itself has committed crimes. Now, how many decisions were they criminal decisions against the Unification Church or leaders of the Unification Church in Japan? The answer is 0. So the first reaction of Prime Minister Kishida, who was Prime Minister until yesterday, now has been replaced. Prime Minister Kishida went to the parliament and said, we are very sorry. We understand everybody hates the Unification Church, now called the Family Federation, but let's call it Unification Church. We cannot dissolve the Unification Church because they have not committed any crime. And the anti-cultists had already asked for the dissolution 5-6 times. They also said, no, because first you should sue them in criminal court, prove that they have committed crime, and then come back. But then Kishida, after he gave his speech, he was vilified by the media, who called for his immediate resignation, called him an accomplice of the Antichrist and the devil Unification Church. So after 24 hours, he went to the parliament a second time, saying, I have slept over the issue, and I believe we need a new interpretation, that it's enough to be dissolved, that you have lost some civil cases. And that comes to the third point. Did the Unification Church lose civil cases? Yes, like everybody else. The Unification Church was involved in a number of civil cases by people who wanted back their donations or wanted damages for having been allegedly mistreated. In 30-something cases, the Unification Church lost. It's never said that in a dozen of cases the Unification Church won, but they don't count. What they count is they lost. But what are these cases all about? And that's also interesting. One way of attacking religious movement, which was invented in the United States in the 1970s, was called deprogramming, meaning adult members of religious movements were kidnapped in the streets by people acting on behalf of their parents and taken to motel or remote homes where they were closed like in a private jail and bombarded by these deprogrammers who pretended they were able to make them change their mind, and some did, some pretended to do just to escape, some were beaten. In Korea, 2 were killed by the deprogrammers. But in the United States, after some uncertainty, because it looked like a family matter, the courts of law already in the past century decided deprogramming was a crime. Same in European Union, the European Court of Human Rights says it's not a matter for the single state, it's a crime, it cannot be done. Only Japan continued to do it, and in Japan there were 4,300 attempts at deprogramming members of the Unification Church, and many more of Shincheonji, and quite a few number of Jehovah's Witnesses and other groups, until a famous case of a gentleman called Toru Goto. Toru Goto was kidnapped by his parents and kept imprisoned for 12 years until he was a human skeleton, because they gave him very little to eat. And in the end, he was liberated, and this case was so scandalous that the courts in Japan finally ruled in 2014, so 20 years after the United States, 15 years after Europe, that deprogramming was illegal, and up to the Supreme Court. Who were those who won the civil cases against Japan? In most cases, they were people who had been successfully deprogrammed. And to prove they had been successfully deprogrammed, it was not enough to say, I will leave the Unification Church. That's easy. They were saying, if you want to be set free, you should give a power of attorney to an anti-cult lawyer to sue the Unification Church in a civil case. Otherwise, we will not let you free because we don't believe. And as a journalist, in Japan, who is also a sociologist, say that's very similar to what Japan did when they persecuted the Christians, killing some tens of thousands in the 17th century. They put in the main square a picture of Jesus, and you should pass on it and kick Jesus with your feet. If you didn't, it was evidence you were a Christian and you were immediately executed. So that's a similar system. To prove you are no longer a member of Unification Church, you should sign and authorize the lawyer to sue on your behalf. Well, there are some parallel stories. They are not important. In some cases, they didn't even sign. The signature was false. But in most of the cases which are now used for the dissolution, civil cases, not criminal, it were deprogrammees, people who had been deprogrammed, that had signed this power of attorney to the lawyer to sue the church and recover money from the church. So based on these civil cases, for the first time in Japanese legal history, the dissolution case is going on. That's only part of the story, and it affects only, so to speak, the Unification Church. But then there are laws affecting everybody. One law and one regulation was passed on donations to controversial groups. We don't know what are controversial groups. You are controversial because the anti-cultists say you are controversial, the government, we don't know. If you donate to controversial group, it is presumed that you donated because you were brainwashed. Of course, brainwashing is a pseudo-scientific theory, no serious scholar of religion would agree with, but it is re-emerging in different countries, including Japan. Now, it may seem I make this up, and I admit I simplify a big law, but we published the law in the Journal of CESNUR in English. You can read it. And basically, it works as such. Controversial religion, if you donated, the term is very long, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. If you donated, and when you donated, you felt slightly confused or dizzy, that's proof you were brainwashed, so you can get your money back. If you didn't feel confused or dizzy, that proved the brainwashing was very effective, so you can get your money back. And if you insist today that you donate voluntarily, it proves that you are still under the brainwashing. So your relatives, your aunt, your children, your grandchildren, or a prosecutor can ask for the donation back on your behalf, even if you don't want to. You say, I was perfectly happy to have donated. So there is no way the controversial group can keep the donation. And this is about donation. Number 3, in fact, Yamagami was not a Nisei, a second-generation member, because the mother joined when he was already an adult. But since it seems there was a big problem of the poor second-generation member who grew up in Jehovah's Witnesses or Unification Church, they passed a regulation in forms of question and answer about education of children in religion. Nota bene, not in controversial religion this time, in all religions, with a long list of things which are forbidden. So some things target the Unification Church, say you should not bring your children to religious meeting, if there are, in this time they re-enter controversial teachings. But some things target other groups. For instance, it's forbidden to prevent children from celebrating birthdays. There is only one religion preventing children from celebrating birthdays, the Jehovah's Witnesses. It is forbidden to tell children that it's wrong to receive blood transfusions. Again, there is only one religion doing this, the Jehovah's Witnesses. But then it becomes more large. It's forbidden for children, and not that children are minor of 18. So it can mean a 17-year-old is a child in this regulation. It is forbidden to take them to take confession if in the confession there is a risk that they will talk about sexual things. Now, I'm a Roman Catholic. When I was 16, I believe most of the confessions were about sexual things. I don't believe the average 16-year-old will confess tax evasion. So what they will confess, that they touched or looked at the girl or at the boy in an improper way. In this case, that's very serious because not only that's a violation of regulation on religion, it's sexual abuse. So the penalties are there. It goes on. It is forbidden to tell minor daughters that abortion is wrong. And that, of course, it's Catholics, evangelicals, and many others. It is forbidden to talk to children about hell because they are scared and they can be traumatized if you talk about hell. And in an opinion I gave to the government of Japan for the Jehovah's Witnesses, I attached the Catholic Catechism for children, and it talks about the devil and hell. Catechism of 2 years ago, not Catechism of 100 years ago. And also I say, well, not talking about hell, and it's written also showing visual images of hell to minors is forbidden. We have, I live near Pisa in Italy, where we have a fantastic cemetery of Middle Ages with very beautiful representation of hell. And I know the mayor, we should say it's forbidden to enter to Japanese minor of 18-year-old because otherwise the law is violated and they are traumatized. Doesn't even finish here. It is forbidden to read to the children religious text which talks about subjects like adultery or illicit sexual relationship, and they mean the Bible. Because in the Bible, of course, there is the adultery of King David, there is the story of Susan and the old man who wanted to do things with her. This is and it's very strange because number one, again, you should exclude Japanese minor of 18 from most museums in the world, which depict this biblical sexy scene. But Japan has been condemned 12 times by UNICEF for exposing children to manga, meaning comics, which are over-sexualized. So if it's in the manga, it's okay, but if it's in the Bible, it's not okay. So it's really a crazy thing, and it's one which has been condemned by the United Nations, because 4 rapporteurs of United Nations wrote a letter to Japan, including the rapporteur on freedom of religion and belief, and it is to say, what the heck is going on? This regulation on children looks a little bit strange. They answered the last day saying it's okay. Then the last thing, based mostly on this regulation on children, they opened 2 investigations on Jehovah's Witnesses. And Jehovah's Witnesses are precisely accused of abusing children by not letting them celebrate the birthdays, talking to them about hell, exposing them to pornographic stories in the Bible, like King David adultery, and on and on. Jehovah's Witnesses answered with a 600-page memoir, which includes a chapter written by me, and they are still discussing. So we don't know if the Jehovah's Witnesses will also be targeted by this solution, but surely they are accused daily of child abuse. They are also accused of something very interesting, because they found some old ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who testified and called press conference that when they were young, at the latest in the 1950s, they were whipped by their parents with a whip. Now that's surely true. The problem is corporal punishment became illegal in Japan only in 2020. And I and my colleague Holly Falk, we decided to read some Japanese sociologists of education, and we found that those born before 1970 in Japan, 80% report they were whipped by the parents when they were children. So it's not a problem of the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's a problem of Japanese society. You know, many societies, we know in England, for instance, until the 2000 in public schools there were corporal punishment. So it's not a problem specific to the Jehovah's Witnesses. Of course, now we have a sensitivity that whipping children is not good, but it was not so 100 years ago or 80 years ago or 70. And it was not illegal in Japan until 2020. So that's, of course, they are singled out for something everybody did, as if it was proving how bad are the Jehovah's Witnesses. So that's what's happening in Japan, and there are many reasons for this. And since these reasons are not specific to Japan, but to some extent are international, I believe that's a good moment to pass the podium to Rosita to explain a little bit about international anti-cult movement. But I want to mention, because Peter attributed it to Rosita, I believe Rosita will talk about other things, mention that one byproduct of all this is discrimination of believers of Unification Church and the Jehovah's Witnesses, and all connected organizations, Universal Peace Federation, Women's Federation for War Peace, all these people all of a sudden discover they want to print a magazine. The printers say, we cannot print because you are connected with the Unification Church, which is a bad, sinister organization. They want to rent a hall. They say, you cannot rent because you are connected with an anti-social organization. They are not admitted to university. Some husbands who are not part, but the wife is, have divorced the wife. So it's not only about laws, because behind laws there is always human stories and a lot of human suffering. And this discrimination is now becoming really paradoxical. The Women's Federation is preventing from teaching Japanese language to foreigners, saying you are connected with Unification Church, so you cannot do this. And the Japanese Women Federation had a wonderful school in Senegal. And that was funded like 10% by Japanese government and 90% by the Women's Federation, with donation by the members. And after a member of the Communist Party of Japan attacked the government in parliament for cooperating in Japan with Unification Church, was the Women's Federation, never mind, in Senegal, the Japanese sent a delegation of special agents to Senegal to terrorize the principal of the school. Actually, she went to the hospital because she had a panic attack, and persuading her to take away, even to repaint the school in a different color, to take away any evidence that it was connected with the Women's Federation, who had paid for 90% of it. And to expel the only teacher who was connected with the Women's Federation, and basically the school was stolen because the government of Japan, who had paid 10%, confiscated everything from those who had paid 90%. Not with the complicity of the Senegal government. The Senegal government told the Women's Federation, we are in sympathy with you, but they didn't have the guts or the power to block the Japanese special agent who went to Senegal and basically treated Senegal like a province of Japan. So I could go on, but that gives you just a taste of what's happening, which is unbelievable, but perhaps it will be more believable after you hear from Rosita. Thank you.